Hello, and welcome to this Google Hangout on how to grow your business with mentoring, as part of a series brought to you in partnership between Google for Entrepreneurs and Virgin Unite. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag mentoring to grow. Today, we're going to focus on discussing why mentoring is important. I'm delighted to welcome two distinguished guests to join us. They are Timothy Nash and Jane Wurwand. Before we start, let me just introduce myself. My name is Mei Shui from Virgin Startup. Virgin Startup is a not-for-profit organization set up by Virgin Group to providing support and finance as well as mentoring to entrepreneurs who want to start up their own business in the UK. Jane, how are you?
Good. Good morning from Los Angeles, May.
Thank you so much for making the time to take part in this discussion. Tim, can you see me?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon from London.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Good, thank you. Great.
Good. Very well. Let me introduce our two guests to speak first before we go into the discussion. Tim is a well-regarded private investment advisor to private clients. Before Tim's work has enabled him to spend equal amount of time on both his work and not-for-profit causes that he cares about. And his work has also enabled him to travel and work in many parts of the world. And Tim's passion is really on flying and nature conservation. And he has recently funded African Digital Education Trust, an education tech training campus in the township in Johannesburg, where they focus on teaching students and teachers by using technology and digital as well as STEM digital content. And Jane is a well-known, I think Jane's probably one of the most well-known and recognized authority in skin therapy. She founded Dermalogica and International Dermal Institute for postgraduate training centers. And under her leadership, Dermalogica has become one of the leading international brands on skin therapy, which is used by more than 100,000 professional skin therapists in over 80 countries. Jane is also an active promoter of entrepreneurship. In 2011, Jane founded FIGHT, short for Financial Independence Through Entrepreneurship. Under FIGHT since 2011, Jane has supported, her initiative has supported more than 60,000 women across the globe gaining financial independence. So we're really in expert hands today to discuss mentoring aspect, why mentoring is important for entrepreneurs and other scenarios. Before we start, I just want to remind viewers that you can join in the conversation by using hashtag mentoring to grow. Without further ado, shall we get started?
Great.
Okay, let me perhaps ask Jane the question first. Jane, why do you think mentoring is so important for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think as an entrepreneur, it's important to have somebody that can, I actually like the word sort of sponsoring even more than mentoring. I don't know, mentoring to me sometimes sounds a little bit condescending, whereas sponsoring I think is something that can happen whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. In other words, you're sort of acting entrepreneurially within a large corporation. And I think it's important to have somebody who mentors you or sponsors you, who's kind of trodden the path before you. They know what the pitfalls might be, and they can also push you a little bit to say, you know what, you should take that risk. You can do it. You've done the necessary hard work. Take the leap of faith. And you feel as if you've got somebody literally who has your back. And as you're going through a process of risk-taking, it's often helpful to have somebody who is also a risk taker and has done it successfully say to you, look, that's normal to feel a little uneasy at this stage. Don't worry, go forward, go for it, it'll work. I think it's just a matter of having somebody who's taken that leap before. I do think it's important that the person that's mentoring you or sponsoring you, at least one of them, be an entrepreneur, because it's a very different mindset to somebody who's in finance or venture capital, and I think entrepreneurial mentoring is best done by somebody, at least one of the mentors on your team of mentors perhaps, is somebody who's an entrepreneur.
Okay, and do you think that mentor needs to be in the same industry as the business you are operating in?
I think it definitely helps, especially if you're in an industry that's niche or specific. Sorry, did you pose that to Tim, May, or did you pose that to me?
I posed to you, then I'm going to ask.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I think it's important because, for example, I'm in the niche prestige cosmetic business, particularly skincare. So there are things in our industry that are very particular, like the gross profit margins in prestige skincare are usually over 80%, which is unheard of in any other industry. If somebody doesn't know that, and I've had conversations with people who are not in our industry, and they sort of say, what? That's crazy. But they don't know our industry. They also don't understand the distribution networks and how you have to obviously work backwards from your retail price to afford a wholesale margin and a distributor margin, and then work out FOB from Los Angeles, for example. So I think it really helps if you've got someone that understands. If you're in pharmaceuticals, it really helps if you know someone who's mentoring you who understands the FDA regulations, which are different from the EU regulations, which are different from the Chinese regulations, which are different from Health Canada or Australia. So I think it does help if you've got somebody who understands your industry.
Okay, great. Tim, can I now put the question forward to you? And do you agree with what Jane is saying, that mentoring should be having a similar industry experience as your business is operating in?
Yeah, I was listening to Jane there, and almost I felt like jumping out of my chair and starting to cheer at what she was saying, because having grown up in a family business myself, in a way I sort of had that in-house mentoring a little bit from family, but I lacked the official type of mentoring and support that Jane was talking about. And I was sitting here thinking, wow, wouldn't that be amazing? That's exactly what I would have loved to have had. And, you know, clearly with her experience and having done this, has a great understanding, really, to me, from what she was saying, as to the kind of mentor one really needs. And yes, I would absolutely agree that a mentor from within the same industry, or at least from something closely related, must be the right kind of person to help you to avoid the pitfalls of your own specific industry, because you know, every job in the world, every task, every industry has some slight differences, has some nuances, and I think you can only get better advice from a mentor who knows your industry well, rather than some sort of generalist advice.
Okay. We agreed on that. The mentor would be really beneficial to have the similar experience in the same industry. But what about the mentor themselves? What kind of person makes best mentor? Do mentors need to be entrepreneurs themselves? If I could go to Jane for this question first, then Tim next, please.
Wow, it's interesting. Well, I guess if you need somebody who is going to help you with an entrepreneurial business, I think it does help if they're an entrepreneur. I think the best type of mentor is somebody who's succinct, direct, and not afraid to kind of tell it as it is. When you're mentoring somebody, I think it's important to not be a crowd pleaser. I think you've got to be very focused on the person you're mentoring and work with them like a partner. Because of course you want to applaud them and encourage them, but you also have to be factual and practical. And if you see them making an error, I think you have to be authentic and say to them, you know, I'm not sure if you're heading in the right direction there. Let's look at some other options for you, because I see that you could be wasting a lot of time on this. I had a situation where I was mentoring somebody who was launching an aromatherapy product. We're using essential oils. And they were going to bring in the raw materials from Australia. And then they decided to bring in finished goods from Australia. And it was the time when the Australian dollar was abnormally high against the US dollar. And I said to them, you're crazy bringing in finished goods. You've got to try and manufacture here in the States. And it was a bit of a conversation, a bit of a fierce conversation, because they really liked these finished goods they'd sourced. And I just said to them, you're making a big mistake. You will never achieve your margins. And now, 5 years later, they thank me for being as strong as I was with them, because I think it's important as a mentor that you not just try and please and applaud your mentee, but that you really try and coach them. You want them to be successful. So it's got to be as if it was your own business. Has to be a mentor has to be someone that really takes it personally and takes it to heart.
Okay, thank you. And Tim, your view?
Yeah, I think from a business point of view, Jane summed it up beautifully. The kind of mentor that I would imagine would be an effective mentor. I think the only thing that maybe I would add to that is, to me, it would seem like that if you have a mentor who can empathize with how it feels to go through the process of entrepreneurship, the days when you're feeling down, when things are not working out, if you've got the kind of mentor who can say, I know how it feels, hang in there, keep going, we'll get out the other side and you'll make a success of this. I think that must be something that's really important in a mentor as well.
Okay. Jane, and you talked about, you obviously have been mentoring mentees, but what about in your journey to start up a hugely global brand, successful business? Did you have a mentor?
I think I probably should have had a mentor. I mean, now I'm hearing all about mentoring and entrepreneurship. And when we started Dermalogica 30 years ago, I'd never heard that word in our industry. But so I should have probably should have gone on that quicker. But I will say that I think I was very blessed in two ways. First of all, I came to entrepreneurship through vocational skills training. So I went to beauty school. I went from high school, I went to beauty school. That's my only qualification and training. I never went to business school. I've never taken a business course. I came to the United States with a suitcase in one hand, a beauty school and diploma in the other hand, and a really smart partner who's now my husband. He was so great, I married him.
I guess in a sense, he's your mentor, you could say.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are each other's mentors. We're very different in our approach, and we are each other's mentors. But also, coming through the vocational skills training, you do an apprenticeship. And in your apprenticeship, I now realize that everyone I ever apprenticed for, all those skin therapists and hairstylists and salon owners, when you go through, you're an indentured apprentice, they're all mentoring you every single day. And it's tough. But they were all my mentors. They taught me my work ethic. They taught me my standards, the details of the profession, and real life experience. So I guess they were all my mentors, but I never had an official person, just my partner who's my husband, and we've started the business together and we've run it and grown it, scaled it up together.
Right, okay. And time obviously have changed. Now mentoring is become such an important aspect in terms of providing business support. In Virgin Startup, one of our key offerings is actually mentoring. We engage large number of volunteer mentors to providing hands-on support to entrepreneurs. And Tim, can I ask you, in terms of your experience, I mean, you're working very closely with Virgin Galactic. You are one of the founder, customer of Virgin Galactic. You've been actively involved in their sort of African initiative through the power of opening space to encourage young people be more entrepreneurial and also to be more engaged in the STEM education. So what, in your view, in terms of, we talked about mentoring in the business context, but what about in the education context? We touched on earlier that you launched a African Education Trust, Digital Education Trust. What do you think mentoring could help in kind of educational environment?
So just to step back a little bit, those of us who are future astronauts, as we're rather grandly called, and are going to go into space one day with Virgin Galactic, got together at one point in time and said that we would like to have an initiative amongst the Virgin Galactic customers that would help to put something back rather than us just having a good time and going into space and that being the end of it. And so the whole Galactic Unite initiative was born out of that. And because of our links with space, and because of the fact that the space industry is going to need so many engineers in the future and people who are trained in maths and science, the decision was made that that would be where we should really focus our efforts, and we felt that that's where we could make a real difference in promoting STEM education at school level, so that all of those people who we need to be interested in science, technology, engineering, and maths would study those subjects at high school and then end up being the people who are going to work in this industry in the future. So as part of that initiative, because I originally came from South Africa and grew up in Africa, decided that what I would really like to do is bring that initiative to Africa and try and make a real difference in Africa to the teaching of science and technology. We tend not to use the E for engineering there, but more for English, because of the fact that teaching in English, which is the second language for most people there, getting English up to a higher standard is very important, and then of course maths as well. So we've started in a disadvantaged area of Johannesburg, one of the townships there. We've set up what we've called the African Digital Education Trust, and what we're doing there is we are reaching out to the local schools, and we have a program where we are helping to train the teachers to bring digital education into the classroom, to see it as a tool to improve the outcomes in those subjects, because they tend to be very poorly taught in South Africa in particular, but across Africa generally. South Africa is one of the lowest in the world in terms of the maths and science outcomes that it achieves. And so we're trying to find a way to make a huge difference to the standard at which people achieve at high school and then primary school in those subjects, so that ultimately people in Africa can compete on a level playing field with people who are in much more developed societies in what is going to be one of the great industries of the future.
Okay, wonderful. Are you trying to introduce a mentoring system into the, become part of the program?
Yes, absolutely. We sort of have done it both informally and formally. Obviously, within some of the children that we're meeting and the children that we are starting to bring into the center, we're finding they're full of ideas, and we're working with the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship in South Africa, both to help mentor some of their entrepreneurs, as well as linking some of the students that we have potentially with good ideas that might be able to work with the Branson Center. The other element of the Galactic Unite initiative is that we've set up a number of scholarships at high schools in South Africa to enable people to study maths and science subjects and to specialize in them. And we have, as part of the Galactic Unite initiative, been able to specifically link them with a mentor that works for Galactic Unite. So, for example, we have a high school student of 16 years old in Johannesburg, and she has a mentor who's a great rocket scientist in California, busy building the spaceship every day of her life, and they get to talk to one another, and obviously it gives the student in South Africa huge inspiration to study harder and to dream dreams beyond which I could dream. She's going to be a brain surgeon or something fantastic like that, and I think it's been a wonderful encouragement to her and helps to stimulate her in her studies by having such a fantastic mentor as well.
Okay, that sounds a wonderful initiative. And it sounds like, in the educational environment, the context, do mentors need to be very different to business mentors? We discussed earlier about the business, and Jane made a really very powerful and good point about what mentor needs to be. What about in the education context? what are the key difference between mentoring a young student versus someone mentoring an aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, I suppose the difference is obviously you're encouraging someone as to what they could be, what they could do in the future, as opposed to right now what is the business that you're working on. But at the same time, really, I wouldn't think that it's a whole lot different between guiding someone through their startup business and guiding someone through their studies. I think, some of the elements I spoke about, encouraging people when they're down, helping them to extend their horizons and look beyond today's problems. I think those are very similar. And so in many ways that empathy that a mentor needs to have for their mentee is probably very similar when you're an educational mentor versus an entrepreneurial mentor.
Wonderful.
I'd like to. Can I chime in on the education piece, May?
Yes, please. I was going to ask you. Yes.
Yeah. Education is really the base of our company, and we train over 100,000 skin therapists a year. 98% are women, so it's a very unique industry. And I will say that as a teacher and as a mentor, because as Tim said, it's sort of the same thing in a different context. Mm-hmm. One thing that we kind of drum into our instructors is, as a teacher, I'm a teacher myself, as a teacher, for me, a great teacher is not someone who stands up and can show the students or show the mentee, if you're mentoring, look how I can do this and look how good I am at doing this. It's sort of hope that you would already be good if you're teaching it. Mm-hmm. Because that can be intimidating to the student. I think if a student leaves a class saying, oh my gosh, that teacher was amazing. I mean, I could never be as good as that. Weren't they fantastic? To me, that's a failed class. Because what you really want is for the student to say, watch what you're doing, and for that teacher or that mentor to be able to have that aha moment with the student where it's not just, look, I can do this, but the student says, you know what, I think I could do that. I think I could be good at that. Let me try that. And when they try it, and you're encouraging them and applauding them and saying, look, yes, you look, that's great. That idea of the student suddenly saying, oh my gosh, not only could I do this, I think I could be really good at this. And perhaps it's something that they've never really thought that they've been good at anything before. But when they have that moment where they say, oh my gosh, not only is my teacher great, but I think I could be great too, that for me is what a mentor or a teacher lives for. You want that moment where the student realizes, I just unlocked something within myself that is going to be a key to my future. And for me, anyway, that's when you've done a great job.
Right.
And May, if I may come back on that, Jane just reminded me, one of the things we have particularly found is that as you introduce technology into the classroom, many teachers feel quite threatened by that. Yeah. And the fact that those young students actually are probably more advanced with technology than what the teachers are. Mm-hmm. So it's almost the flip side of what Jane was saying. You almost need to get the poor teacher to have the aha moment to say, yeah, oh, actually I can also turn on a tablet and learn how to use it. So that that is why our program is not only focusing on the students, but it is also focusing on the teachers and helping to train the teachers how to use that digital technology in the classroom so that they see it as an aid to them being able to teach rather than a threat to their jobs.
It's such a good point.
That's Tim. That's certainly the point. When I reading about your digital trust in Johannesburg, it's very much teaching both for students and for teachers. And I think what you said also raises another point, which I would like to discuss with both of you, is that mentoring relationship, in fact, from what we have seen, it's not just a benefit for mentees themselves. In fact, mentors themselves get enormous benefit from that relationship. We have mentors, we have, senior partners of law firm, and they said, from what they're mentoring young entrepreneurs, they have learned probably more, they learned more from mentoring mentees than from the other way around. So what's your view on that? Especially, Jane, you have mentored, you said you mentor people, and what's your experience? Could you share that with us?
I completely agree with Tim. It's a humbling experience when you're working with a student or a mentee that is highly skilled in an area that you are clueless about. It's sort of like when I sit with my 11th grade daughter and try and figure out anything in her math book. That's a puzzle in and of itself. But I think that there's a huge opportunity as a mentor to really get an enormous amount of gratification. Not only because you feel good when you share something that works for a student or a mentee, but I think more importantly, it forces you to sort of look back on your journey and question yourself why you made those choices or decisions, because the mentee will question you. Well, why did you decide to call it that? Or why did you decide? I had a mentee the other day say to me, I love the way that Dermalogica always uses black and white photography. And I said, yeah, thanks. It's part of the brand because the colors of our brand are gray and white. And they said, oh, it's just so cool. Is that why you decided to do it? And I said, I had to really think back. And I said, well, no, actually, the reason we did it was when photography was obviously not digital, it was film, and 4-color separation for any kind of photography on paper was hugely expensive. So we did it because we were broke. It was the cheapest way to do it. But in fact, it became then part of our brand ID. And the same for our packaging. Our packaging was grey and white because we couldn't afford the 4-color separation process on a carton. So it forces you to relive those lessons that you learned that now seem quite purposeful, but at the time were pretty random, but have become part of your entrepreneurial story. And so it's not just that you're learning something new from your mentee, you're also learning something from yourself as you question the journey.
Yeah, it's like a journey of rediscovering yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you realize how sometimes random an entrepreneurial story is, and yet the very thing that you thought was your weakness turns out to be your strength.
Yes, that's really interesting. What about Tim? And have you found it difficult when you were launching the mentoring scheme in Africa with the Galactic Unite initiative? How did you present this to make people want to be volunteer and providing the mentoring support to students?
There was certainly no difficulty in getting people to volunteer. I mean, the people who work for Virgin Galactic across in California and the West Coast were hugely enthusiastic about being mentors. And I guess that just comes from the fact that they, so love space and the new frontiers that they're trying to break. That being able to share that and teach other people about what they're doing and spread the word seems to come to them naturally. So it certainly wasn't any difficulty for us trying to find people who would mentor the students. And as we grow the number of students, I'm sure we'll have lots of volunteers who are prepared to do that. I was just thinking as Jane was talking as well, and some of the questions you asked, in a way, while I haven't formally sort of been a mentor myself, in many ways, every day of your life, being around these kind of students, people who are doing entrepreneurial things, you actually end up effectively being a mentor without even realizing it.
Without realizing, you have the title of mentoring, yes.
Yeah, and so you're constantly talking with them about their businesses, their ideas. As Jane said, they ask you about things that you did. And so I think that it's actually quite often, many of us are mentors without necessarily having that formal label attached to us.
Okay. Jane, let's turn back into mentoring in the business context. Jane, do you think mentoring makes any difference to the business survivability and success?
I think it makes a difference in as much as I think if the entrepreneur feels supported and that they have a sounding board, I think it makes them often have the confidence to take the risks necessary to grow the business. So absolutely, it is the entrepreneur that is ultimately going to grow or fail in that business. It's not the silent hand of the mentor. But I think that having a mentor can help you feel more confident to do it. I think one of the big issues in mentoring is a lot of great people who would have a lot to share think that they don't have the time to mentor. And I think that's a key issue. And also sometimes people that, when you're starting a business and you're growing it, as a mentee, you often think, well, I don't have time to find a mentor. I don't have time to sit down with them and kind of discuss my business plan. It's going to take hours. And you're so busy trying to grow your business and do stuff and put food on the table that you often think this is a luxury, you can't afford. And I think that it's important to frame the mentoring relationship from a time point of view that makes sense for both the mentee and the mentor. Often I'll have someone come up to me and they'll say, or they'll email me and they'll say, I really like you to mentor me, which is like a heck of a responsibility. And I usually say, no, we're not going to have an official kind of relationship. But here's the thing. If you have specific questions that you want to pose to me, shoot me an email. I will answer them. And keep it precise and specific, and I'll get back to you quickly, and I will reply in the same way. If there's something that you want to talk further about on the phone, let's get on a call, talk it through, 15 minutes tops. You don't want your mentoring sessions to turn into long, drag-out lunches that are like therapy sessions, because that's a whole other thing, And so I think that you have to define what the parameters of the relationship are and then be pretty strict about it, because you want to get stuff done. A successful mentor doesn't have time to sit around unless they're retired, which, maybe then they do. But the successful mentee also shouldn't have enough time to sit around for hours. They've got to be on it, get busy, and then when we have a follow-up call or conversation, you better tell me that you actioned what we talked about, or if you didn't, what action you did take. Because otherwise it can turn into a constant cycling through of issues and problems that don't get resolved because the mentee isn't called to action. And you need to keep their feet to the fire and keep them focused on what needs to be done.
Very valid point. And I can just relate to what, our own experience again. Initially, we tried very hard to legislate mentors should spend a certain amount, 1 hour per month with mentees. And very soon realized, exactly as you said, both mentor and mentee are busy people. They should use their time effectively. So we try to make it as flexible as possible for both parties to make the relationship work. Do you think mentors should also be trained before they become trained to be a mentor? Do they need any special skill? Because most mentors bring lots of, relevant business expertise and experiences to the table, but do they need other skills? Are there any special skills that not necessarily everyone has?
I think a good mentor has to be pretty pragmatic and decisive. I think if you're listening to the issue that your mentee is telling you, you have to have the ability to kind of see through the kind of the peripheral information, the storytelling piece, down to what the actual question is. And sometimes I'll say to my mentees as they're talking, okay, so what is your question about that? So I've heard this, what is the question you have? Or what is the decision you're making about that? Because I think that's important. So I think the mentor, you kind of have to keep the train on the tracks. What is the goal here? What are we going to discuss, and what is our outcome going to be? And so I think a good mentor has to be pretty decisive and pragmatic, see through what's being said and kind of cut to the chase.
Okay, great. I have a feeling that you might get lots of emails from viewers watching this discussion, want you to be their mentors. Tim,
that's why Twitter comes in really well, because it limits you to the amount of characters. But
yes,
not really, it doesn't have to be on Twitter.
They can come straight to point, yes. Yeah. Tim, what do you think? I mean, it's very interesting because you said you haven't had a mentor. So perhaps you are in a quite good position to tell, can you see any downside of mentoring when you are an entrepreneur? When you're trying to start a business, have a mentoring, is there any downside that one should be mindful and able to kind of expect that to manage that more effectively?
I mean, clearly, if you've got a good mentor, I cannot see any downside to it. And just listening to Jane there, and the way she was, in essence, even someone who's approaching her to be mentored, she's immediately making them define the question they want to ask, etc. So that alone is valuable advice. They haven't even yet, got to the point of asking for specific advice, but the way she's making them ask for that advice, to me, is valuable for the way they must run their businesses. So, yeah, I cannot see that unless you've chosen completely the wrong mentor. I cannot see that there's any downside to mentoring. I mean, if you've got the right person in there, and that person is, as Jane was saying, getting you to define the question, making sure that you are not just telling the story, but actually getting to what is the question that I can answer for you, and then enabling your mentor to answer that question for you. Unless they get it completely wrong, which I very much doubt. Clearly, if they've been through the process themselves, and in many cases, it may not be a yes or a no answer. It may be just the encouragement to keep going, or very often it's just eliciting, in my view, just eliciting what the entrepreneur already knows. It's helping them to define that for themselves. It's guiding them to an answer that deep down they've already got.
Yeah.
So, like I said, unless you've chosen someone who just isn't suited temperamentally to be a mentor, and then maybe you end up discouraged and feeling you're getting nothing from it, that's the only downside I can see. But then my answer in that situation would be, if you don't feel that you're getting a whole lot out of your mentoring relationship, change your mentor. Find one that does work for you.
I can say Jane nodding in agreement. Tim, you mentioned about you to find the right mentor. So can I ask both of you? Can I give the question to Jane first? What tips do you have for entrepreneurs who want to find a mentor? What's the best way to find a really good and suitable mentor?
I think the most important thing is chemistry. You have to have the right personality with each other. It's very rare, but I have actually had mentees that I've dropped because we didn't have the right chemistry. And I think they probably would have agreed. Do you have to have the right chemistry? I remember mentoring, and I'm on the board at the UCLA Anderson Business School for entrepreneurship, so this is where I get a lot of mentors. And one of the students came to me, and she had wanted to start a business, and it was a pretty solid idea. But then she said to me, I need $5 million of first-round funding. And I said, $5 million? Well, I have no idea where you're going to do that, because I started my company on $14,000 and bootstrapped it up. I'm definitely the wrong mentor. You need to speak to somebody in private equity or venture capital, because I don't even know who's going to lend you $5 million.
Yeah.
I knew there was going to be a disconnect, because she also wanted offices in Beverly Hills, which is very high rental. I'm like, okay, we're coming from two completely different points of reference. And I honestly did not think I was going to be the best mentor for her, and she probably would agree. So I think chemistry is important. And I think that, start off with a conversation and see if it's there. And also ask the mentee, don't be afraid to say, what is it you think I'm going to be able to offer you that you want me to be your mentor? And they need to kind of have an answer. And also, when you're the mentor, look at that mentee and say, what do you think you can bring to them? What is it you could offer them that would be somehow helpful to them? And as Tim said, sometimes it may just be encouragement. There are moments where, as an entrepreneur, you start to doubt your own knowledge or your own determination. And again, as Tim said, you kind of have the answer in you. And sometimes you just need your mentor to say to you, okay, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but you know how to do this. You already did this in this situation, that situation, and the other. Now just repeat it. You've learned that lesson already. Now go ahead and repeat it. Get back to me next Tuesday and tell me how that went, and we'll debrief it. And I think that kind of chemistry where you're both on the same page is very important. And a lot of times you meet your mentor, you listen to them, you hear them, you meet them in a business setting or a personal social setting, and you think, I have a great chemistry with this person. I'm going to ask them if they would mentor me. And quite honestly, you might be shocked at who will agree. Don't be afraid to ask somebody and say to them, do you have 15 minutes a month? Let's say that. Do you have 15 minutes a month that I could make a phone call with you or send you an email with very quick questions and answers? To me, that's a great way to start. Because then if it's going well and the chemistry proves to be powerful, a relationship will develop. And now I have great mentees that I actually do have lunch with, and it can take an hour or so because we've developed a really good relationship. And that's when it becomes really interesting as well.
Wonderful. Tim, do you have anything to add to Jane's point?
Yeah, it's interesting. Jane started talking about chemistry, and then at the end of what she was saying, she used the word relationship a number of times, and that's exactly what I was thinking while she was talking. It really is a relationship between two people. So if you're looking for a mentor, or a mentor looking for a mentee, I think fundamentally it has to have that chemistry to where it is a relationship between two people. And I think if you've got that relationship between two people, you get that shared trust, you get that communication that you need, and I think that creates the environment for a great mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jane, can I ask you, we talked earlier about you launched FIGHT, helping women to gain financial independence through entrepreneurship. Can you tell us a bit more about that program and what made you to launch that?
Right, so FIGHT is our social impact initiative at Dermalogica. And basically the premise behind FIGHT is creating opportunities for women specifically to gain financial independence, and doing that through entrepreneurship. And we focus on women specifically because 98% of all skin therapists are women, 92% of all our clients are women, and women own more salons than any other business in any other business sector. So women own 64% of all salons as opposed to 33% of any other business in another sector. So this is an industry all about women entrepreneurs. And because of that, we feel strongly that our authenticity is about helping women entrepreneurs start or grow their business, because that's what made Dermalogica successful. It's also my story. I went to beauty school, I got a vocational training, I then took that training and parlayed it into an entrepreneurial journey, which led to financial success. And it's also the story of my personal story of my mother. My mother was widowed at age 38 with 4 girls to raise. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And she was a nurse. And she fell back on her nursing training in order to keep us together. So I grew up in a household of women where we were being supported by a mother, a single mother, who was supporting us on her training. And, oops, hang on a second, I lost my earpiece. But so that lesson, that work ethic that I learned from my mother, and then I followed that myself, and then saw that followed through in our industry, really led to FIGHT being such a kind of an obvious way for us to repeat that social impact that we have seen so resonant in our field, to make it possible for women in many other industries. We support women in any industry any business that they want to start or grow. And it's been incredibly powerful. I believe that entrepreneurship is the fastest route to financial independence for the majority of people.
Okay. Do you make use of mentoring as a tool to help women in that program?
Yes, we do. And we work with a number of non-profit organizations. In fact, we're very active in South Africa. I was smiling when Tim was talking, because not only is my husband South African, but from Cape Town. I lived there for 4 years as well. And so South Africa is actually a major part of our initiative. We work with 2 non-profit groups called, one is called These Numbers Have Faces, and one is called She's the First. And they help us identify young girls and women that need an opportunity, and we work with mentoring partnerships specific to each country, often if there's a language issue, very specific to that country. But also we'll work with mentoring as we are now, where we'll do it virtually or through technology. And again, we say to our most successful salon owners, we say, do you have 15 minutes a month to be able to speak to somebody who's starting a business? It doesn't have to be in our industry. The entrepreneurial journey isn't exclusive to one industry, but I think it's important that you align the right personalities. So FIGHT is a blueprint. I believe that financial independence, especially for women, is the game changer for solving most of the world's problems. The McKinsey report that just came out last week said that if women were financially empowered to the same level as men, it would put $25 trillion back into the GDP. So it's pretty powerful.
Very powerful figure. You can't really argue with that. Tim, and in your view, and on the mentoring side, how did lots of people probably, especially after having seen the discussion and the very persuasive argument you made on the benefits of mentoring, probably thinking, I'd quite like to be a mentor, but I don't know how, and I don't know what steps to take, and I'm not sure if I have the right skills. What advice would you give to people to become a mentor? That question goes to Tim first, please.
I guess the formal route would be more something that Jane could talk about, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a formal route. I think the very fact that you're saying I would like to do it, very often if you just open the door, someone steps through that door. So I think if you go out there with an open mind, someone starts talking to you about their business, about their idea. If you really want to be a mentor, there's your opportunity straight away. You start responding to those questions. You start giving them feedback. And maybe it won't be that person, but at some point in time, I think it's very likely you will come across someone with whom you have the right kind of relationship, with whom maybe you have commonality in terms of industry or something like that. And I think very often, in a way, in the way that I did, you get into mentorship sort of informally and almost by default without even realizing it. So I don't think you necessarily have to start off and say, okay, I want to be a mentor, now how do I go about it? I think just by being out there, you can be a mentor, and you can do it gradually.
Okay, excellent. And what about you, Jane? Is there any advice you can give to our viewers?
Well, I agree with Tim that it finds you. When you open the door, someone steps through it. I think it's like an entrepreneurial journey. Most entrepreneurs don't start off saying, I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It just drives you crazy that something's not being done in a space that you know well, and you just feel compelled to do something about it. So I think that it sort of happens like that. I remember one time, I would say he was a mentor, and I'm thinking about it. I took some printing. Again, this is before the internet, so it was like when dinosaurs ruled the earth. But I took some printing next door to a print shop from our very first premises. And a guy that was in there also getting printing done looked at the artwork that we kind of roughed up and said, oh, you need help. Where are you located? I said, we're right next door. He said, okay, when I finish my print job, I'm coming in to talk to you. You need help. And he was fantastic. He worked with us for about 5 years on marketing and layouts and that kind of thing. So sometimes, you can just say something at random and it happens. If you want to pursue a more formal approach, then, you can even start in local high schools or technical training schools or universities or community colleges and offer your services. If you've done something which is already successful and you've got a proven track record, especially in your local community, you can easily say, I'd love to be a mentor, help in any way that I can. And oftentimes, if you see a business that intrigues you and you happen to be in that business, and you're an entrepreneur, you say to them, if you ever need help, I'm happy to help in any way.
Yeah. And for example, the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship in South Africa, and I know they have one in the Caribbean, similar sorts of organizations. I'm sure they're always looking for mentors, and someone who really feels they'd like to get into it. Pick up the phone, go down there, visit them. I'm sure pretty quickly they'll absorb you into the process.
I'm sure they will, and I can add that also there's always Virgin Startup, which we are always looking for mentors.
Yeah,
so exactly. Let me add that in. Yes. Tim, I think we lost. I think Jane just went to get some water.
Yeah.
I also want to ask, want to believe, I mean, we actually do occasionally come across entrepreneurs who says, I don't think I need a mentor, I don't want a mentor. What would you say to people, entrepreneurs like that, say, you know, I'm just fine, I know everything I need to know, and I don't need a mentor, I don't believe in mentoring. What would you say to them?
Well, first I'd say that I doubt you know everything you need to know, because none of us know everything we need to know. But I do think that if someone doesn't want a mentor, you shouldn't force a mentor on them, because ultimately it goes down to that relationship thing. You're not going to build a relationship with someone who's saying, I don't need this. You know, it's not a requirement. It's not a rule that every successful entrepreneur has had a mentor. And so if someone says, I don't need one, then accept that they're right, you know.
Okay.
And if at some point in time they change their mind, then keep the door open if they want to change their mind.
Yes, yeah, very much so. That's exactly because we thought it's no point in forcing on people if they don't need a mentor. But very soon they start to realize the way we do it is through lots of case studies, and both from mentor and mentee perspective, to share their experience, to talk about practical examples. And very often people read that and said, actually, I do believe the power of mentoring. And I'm sure after today's session, there's hopefully there is increase in the number of people wants to be a mentor and want to be a mentee. Jane, what about you? What advice would you give to people?
Can you repeat the question for me? Sorry, even in an 80-degree weather in Los Angeles, you can still get bronchitis, which is what I have.
I know. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, still taking part.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. Can you repeat the question? Because I took my earpiece out.
Yes. I was saying to Tim, the question was that some entrepreneurs actually don't see the benefit of mentoring and say to us, I don't want a mentor. What advice would you give to them?
I think it's possible that you haven't found the right one. I think that if you're an entrepreneur, typically you want to get busy, you want to get going, you've got your ideas. You don't want someone telling you it can't be done, and you don't want somebody telling you, well, you don't have the right funding or you don't have the right approach. You may be working with a mentor that's a little too data-driven. And the data in the world doesn't equal a good idea. So you probably need a different type of mentor at different stages of your business. And I think that it's important, when you're first growing and going, you're in what I call that infancy stage. I think of a business like the life cycle of a child. And when you're a toddler and a baby, you need a different kind of care than when you're a teenager or an adult. So I think finding the right mentor, sorry.
Are you okay?
For the right stage is important.
Okay, thank you very much. I think how time flies when you are having, an interesting discussion. While Jane is trying to catch her breath, can I just ask both of you to perhaps give your parting comment on the subject we discussed on the mentoring to our viewers? Tim, can I start with you first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what has sort of struck me about our conversation is that actually mentoring can happen not only in the entrepreneurship phase of your life, but it happens in the school days of your life as well. It happens with the students. It happens with the teachers that are working with them. So, it's a lifelong process. It's part of growing up. It's about learning from someone who's had a similar experience and is able to pass on some of that experience, whatever word we happen to put on it. And I would say to people, keep an open mind. There are always things you can learn from other people. If you can find someone who can guide you, particularly in the area that you're focusing on and where you're trying to make a difference or build a business, I would grab it with both hands. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm sure that it will be helpful to any entrepreneur who finds the right mentor to work with.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you, Tim. What about you, Jane?
I think that don't underestimate what a mentor can bring to you. I think that sometimes you're having a relationship with your mentor, and also you need to be aware that that mentor is speaking about you and speaking about your business. And oftentimes another relationship or a connection develops as a result of your mentor talking to their circle, which may be much larger than your own. So your mentor brings to you connections that is beyond just the relationship you're having with them. I've had situations where people have needed help with contract manufacturing or sourcing tubes or bottles or jars or caps. And I already have those relationships in the industry, so I can bring those to bear.
Yes.
And that's why I like the word sort of sponsor, because I can make those calls and I can make that introduction, and I can help that entrepreneur kind of on a journey that I've already made, or I may know someone else who's had that journey, and I'll say to the mentee, you know what, I know somebody who's in that space, let me make an introduction for you via email, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help. And if they're not, because they're too busy, and you have to respect their time, I've got other people that I could probably connect you to. So I think you need to see your mentor as the hub of a wheel, and there's a lot of spokes coming from your mentor, and it may not even be the mentor themselves that ends up being the most helpful thing in the relationship. It may be another connection or another one beyond that that turns out to be the most rewarding piece.
Okay. I think that's really, well put, and I don't think I can add anything to that. That's really great. Jane, Tim, thank you very much for taking time to join this discussion. Jane, especially to you, we know you're feeling unwell. We really appreciate that.
It is a pleasure. It's a pleasure, and I really wish success to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your insight and your experience. Thank you also for watching and participating. I hope you found the discussion really useful and also gives you the impetus to become a mentor or to become a mentee. You can, of course, continue the discussion by using hashtag mentoring2grow. You can also watch out for the wrap-up blog on virgin.com. And we'll be running more Google Hangouts in the coming months on the theme of entrepreneurship. And I hope that you can recommend our Google Hangouts to your friends or other entrepreneurs that you may know and take part in our future Google Hangouts. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.